Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 20, The Good Samaritan. Hey everyone! How's everyone doing out there? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing okay. It's a beautiful, snowy day here in Colorado. So I just love those days where you're inside and cozy with a sweater on, maybe by the fire, have a mug of some hot beverage of your choice. I just love that. Other than that, in the last week, I've been co-building with my husband and my son the Taj Mahal Lego. And it's been so fun. It's very tedious. It's a very tedious build, but also very calming. There's something about building Lego for me that is very meditative almost. You have to be very focused, especially in a very elaborate set like the Taj Mahal. You really have to concentrate because one little thing, you can't get it wrong. But it's been great. I'm very excited. We've gotten through, I want to say, maybe half of the build at this point, and it's looking amazing. So excited to get that done. Other than that, this past weekend, I was a guest on another podcast called Don't Worry, Be Movie. And it's a podcast created by a couple friends of mine in the improv world, Amanda and Wade. And they created this podcast to discuss movies that are B movies, or maybe not technically a B movie, but the guests come on and discuss a movie that perhaps they thought was under the radar undeservedly, or just kind of didn't get the attention it deserved when it came out. So I went in choosing the movie Contact from 1997. It stars Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. And so we did a big deep dive into Contact. And for the podcast, to prepare, of course, I had to rewatch it. I hadn't watched it in years, but all I knew was when I saw it in 1997, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I had one of those moments where you walk out of the movie and you just have to take a deep breath because you're just kind of blown away by how much you enjoyed it. And that was Contact for me. And I chose it also because I have a distinct memory of telling friends about it and just gushing about the movie, and then having a couple of friends really just kind of cut down my excitement by going, "Oh my God, you liked it? I thought it was so stupid." So it was one of those things where I was like, whoa, was it stupid? No, I liked it. And it was also around a time where these big action kind of movies in that same, I guess you can call it same genre of science fiction and aliens and stuff like that. It was Armageddon. It was Independence Day. So it was these different, I guess Armageddon didn't have aliens. You know what I mean? But anyway, anything kind of like spacecraft type stuff. It was more, it had to be a little bit more flashy and not as cerebral, I suppose, as Contact was. Contact was based on the novel by Carl Sagan, a famous astronomer and scientist. So it doesn't surprise me that it, because it wasn't as flashy as those other movies, it didn't really do as well. But anyway, we had such a great time discussing the movie, and I really encourage you to look up Don't Worry, Be Movie, the podcast with Amanda and Wade. They have had numerous episodes now. I still need to dig in because I looked at the list of episodes and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that movie. I remember that movie. And Amanda and Wade are just fantastic hosts and really funny and just fun to listen to. So I highly recommend that podcast. It was really cool to be a guest on a podcast. I didn't have to worry too much about setting up, or I don't have to worry about editing it. So I liked definitely being on that side. So if you have a podcast, I would love to be a guest on it. I mean, whether or not I know anything about your podcast subject matter, I don't really care. I just like being on podcasts. All right, so let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Good Samaritan from my coffee table book is as follows. Jerry starts dating a beautiful hit-and-run driver, then is torn when he meets the victim and realizes he'd rather date her. Mary Hart's voice causes Kramer to have convulsions. George has an affair with Elaine's married friend after impressing her by saying "God bless you" after she sneezes. This episode was written by Peter Melman. We start out with Jerry in his car. He's talking to Elaine on his car phone. On speakerphone, on his car phone more specifically. And he's kind of giving Elaine a play-by-play. She's not too crazy about being on the speakerphone. It's very annoying. Elaine asks Jerry if he's free on Friday, and he says, yeah, I'm free. She starts talking about she ran into her friend Robin Sandusky, and she invited her to dinner. And then she's interrupted because Jerry sees a car hit another parked car on his block and then just drive off. Elaine says, you got to go after that car. And he's like, well, Elaine, come on, the driver could be dangerous. What are you, yellow? I'm not yellow. And Jerry ultimately doesn't want to be yellow. So he sees the car parking, but the call drops with Elaine. So Elaine's out of the scene at this point. We see Jerry approaching the car of the hit and run driver very gingerly before the driver gets out, kind of stumbling over his words. And you can tell he's scared to confront this person. But then out comes a beautiful woman. And he says, I witnessed that your tire's a little low, which can affect basically the performance of her car. She just greets him with a very beautiful smile. The purpose of this scene, it's our setup scene for the 8th story, Jerry's plot with the hit and run hottie, and a little teaser for Elaine's plot as well. My take, it's fine. I don't really love the whole yella conversation. And this whole setting for this conversation in a car on speakerphone, it's kind of odd. I mean, considering this happened almost 30 years ago, car phones were very rare back then. But of course, we needed this setup so that Elaine can overhear what happens. Jerry seeing that hit and run driver, and she has to be the one convincing him to go after the hit and run driver for the story. So I get it. I do remember the first car phone my dad bought for our sweet-ass Ford Tempo. And when I say sweet-ass Ford Tempo, I mean the worst car. That car, we had so many issues with it. I just remember it was, I think, the best way to describe it would be Lamona, huh? Like how Jerry does his sweet stand-up set about the names of cars. It was definitely a lemon, our Ford Tempo. And the car phone my dad bought, I just remember it being really chunky, which is not surprising because early 90s, all the cell phones were chunky. And it had to be plugged into the cigarette lighter socket in the car. And also, I remember the odds of it working was very low. I don't remember making more than maybe 2 successful calls from that car phone. And my dad would swear at it all the time, going, I spent so much money on this thing. Anyway, that's my first memory of what they called a car phone. Back to this scene. The premise is a bit far-fetched for me as well. I mean, why wouldn't Jerry just kind of follow the car and get the license plate? Maybe if he saw her get out as he was taking it on the license plate, then he could approach her because he thinks she's so beautiful. I think we still could have made it happen where he dates this woman without it being this confrontation. I don't know. I just didn't really love this premise too much. Moving on, we're in Jerry's apartment, and Jerry is telling George that he ended up going out with this woman. And George loves this story. He has no speech. Jerry really liked her, and they flirted. She did that thing where she'd laugh and reach out and touch his arm. George loves that. He cannot get enough of that. Why is that? Why is that so great? Let's not even analyze it. Elaine buzzes, and Jerry tells George, Elaine doesn't need to know about this. George digs. He gets it. And he just goes on. I'm so excited for this relationship, Jerry, because you guys are going to be a great couple. Great couples always have a great story about how they met. And Jerry does have this moment saying, God, am I nuts? She's a criminal. She had no regard for another person's car and just drove off. On the other hand, should she not be allowed to date? As he's sort of talking out this mental debate, he realizes he's drinking a very large glass of milk that George poured for him. And he says, what am I drinking? Milk? Elaine enters. Right away, she wants to know, what happened? The hit and run? Oh, right. So Jerry feels compelled to make up some elaborate story about following this guy into Queens over the bridge. He gets out and says, hey, buddy, I saw you hit that car. So he makes up this story. George eggs him on with the, tell her about the shoving. What shoving? Jerry doesn't really like that. He's already making up this lie, but now he's getting deeper into it because George is giving him some weirdo facts about, or fake facts. And Jerry says, yeah, he got physical with me, but I went into karate stance. You know karate? I know a little. And then he backed off. It was really pathetic. He does a little Mr. Furley, little Don Knotts kind of movement there with the sniff and the pulling up his pants. I guess it's more Barney Fife. I never watched Barney Fife, but I watched Mr. Furley, and that was the same thing. Same actor. Oh, Don Knotts, right? What a great actor. Anyway, getting off track. Kramer enters, and Elaine tells Kramer what Jerry did. Oh, he's so excited. Good for you. People who do that are mentally disturbed. We should send him to Australia. What? Well, that's where England used to send their convicts. Yeah, but they don't anymore. Oh, no. I love that awkward pause that happens in the scene, because what else could there be after that comment except an awkward pause? Kramer has a Band-Aid on his head, and so Elaine asks about it, and he has no idea what happened. He was watching Entertainment Tonight, and he blacked out. Elaine has to leave. She says on her way out that, oh, Jerry, I'll see you on Friday. And he says, oh, no, I can't. He has the date with the hit-and-run driver. But you said you were free. And Jerry says, just take George with you. All George requires is a meal that will be free, and he's there. Jerry asks, well, why do you need anyone? And Elaine says, I hate being alone with a married couple. They're talking about their married friends and their married furniture. And they always make her feel like her life isn't as exciting because she's single. She has a very exciting life. Very exciting. Purpose of this scene. Wow, it's jam-packed with a lot of information, but I think it's done really well. It's very solid writing. We get more information on Elaine's plot, and that gets George involved, and a little bit of an intro into Kramer's plot as well. In my take, I really like the conversation at the top of the scene between George and Jerry before Elaine arrives, especially when they discuss the touch of the arm with the laugh and how Jerry says, let's not even analyze it. I feel like that was a moment for Peter Melman where he couldn't come up with maybe a clever quip or a response. So it was kind of his surrender to that. And it worked out perfectly as Jerry's response. It really did. It was very believable because I think in life that happens. It's like, I don't know, we just like that, whatever. I also like that Jerry takes a break from being so giddy about this woman and considers if he's nuts for dating someone who would do what she did. And I kind of alluded to it, but I did love how he snapped out of that moment because he's somehow drinking milk. When I rewatched this episode, so I'll admit, this isn't an episode I've watched very often. It wasn't a VHS episode for me. I guess we took a break from taping that week. I don't know. So I don't really know the ins and outs of this episode too well. And before he says the line, what am I drinking, milk? I really did have this moment going like, God, that is a big glass of milk. Like I could just feel the stomach ache that I would get if I drink a big glass of milk. Like who drinks big glasses of milk beyond the age of like 10, oh my God, that just reminded me. I was a hostess at a Mexican restaurant for a few years in high school. And there was this creepy guy who would come in on Sunday evenings. I worked the Sunday evening shift, pretty slow night, Sunday evenings at a Mexican restaurant, not too busy. Well, this one guy would come in by himself. And I think he was sort of like interested in me. Keep in mind, I was 16, maybe 17, and this guy was easily in his mid to late 30s. Super creepy, but he definitely had a flirty energy about him. He kept telling me how he used to be a minor league baseball player, which, I mean, my goodness, I couldn't think of anything that was less impressive to me now even, but as a 16-year-old, I don't care. But anyway, he insisted on sitting at a table that was facing the host stand. So basically facing where I was standing for my job. And he would not order any food. He would order a big glass of milk and just drink milk and have me in his eye line. It was very creepy. He seemed harmless, but my manager after a certain point was like, I don't like this guy hanging around. So I don't even know how it went down, but eventually he stopped coming in. But yeah, it was a pretty common occurrence for at least 6 or 7 months. This guy would come in and just drink milk. at his table. No chips, no salsa, nothing else, just drinking milk while facing the host stand. And yeah, super creepy. All right. Okay. I did it again, guys. Sorry, another tangent. But anyway, I liked that moment because I was thinking that before Jerry even said it. I was like, why is he drinking milk? But that being said, George has no problem. He's like, I'm going to drink an entire glass of milk. Who cares? Okay. So getting into the whole lying about what happened with the hit and run driver to Elaine, like Jerry's whole story. It's not really my favorite. I know we get a great payoff later when, Elaine finds out it wasn't true. It was just over the top for me. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of it. And the whole like karate stance, and it just seemed like not very Seinfeldian to me. George agreeing to go with Elaine to her dinner is perfect. And it's kind of like George attending that Peterman party, right? Like he's just really there for the food. He could care less. I just think that's a great kind of runner for George. I mean, the chances of George attending any event is really incumbent upon free food being there. I love that. Elaine's explanation about why she needs a friend there to kind of be this buffer is adorable. I really liked that. And I love the way she exits. I love the whole very, very exciting. She's definitely trying to convince herself. And I think many of us have had those types of friends who, I don't think they mean to, but they inadvertently make you feel badly about your life situation. I've been on that side of it. And then now as like a married woman, I'm so conscious to not do that to single friends of mine. Can I say 100% I've been successful? No, I hope I've been really sensitive, but I've said things that are, a little flippant or something. I hope I haven't. And the same goes, I have kids and some of my friends don't have kids. So I'm always really hypersensitive. Like, don't talk about my kids too much. Don't like brag about my kids. Don't portray my life as better as theirs. Because I honestly don't think that. Like, I'm not one of those people. And I've met people like, well, everyone should have kids. You need to have a kid. Like, I would never say that to anyone because I don't believe that. I believe certain people are put on this earth and they're not meant to procreate. And that's not an insult. It's just, hey, it's not your thing. It's not for everyone. That's a whole different conversation. And I'm not going to go on that tangent now. So let's move on. So the next scene, we are at the dinner with Elaine and her friends and George. And right away, Robin is saying, you went out with a bullfighter? Elaine is smack dab in the middle of making up quite a story about her exciting life. Robin asks, well, what was his name? His name? Eduardo Carocchio. Robin is played by Anne Tallman. Anne guest starred in many series in the 80s and 90s and a little bit into the 2000s as well. I think she does a really good job here. It's a very sort of sweet character who has to deal with a husband who clearly has some rage issues. And I like her performance. I think it's perfectly fine. And I like the character too. She seems very friendly and kind of has a good energy. George is eating his spaghetti disgustingly. And Elaine's just going on and on about this story. She met him in Switzerland. And do they really call it bullfighting? They don't really fight the bull. I mean, she's just in her element. She's making them laugh. And she just says, oh, I just love meeting new people. That's just what life is about. Robin sneezes. Well, George says, God bless you, as a lot of us would. Now, that wasn't so bad, but what he said really pisses off the husband, Michael. He says, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I could see he wasn't going to open his mouth. The purpose of this scene, we sort of see the emergence of George's storyline and purpose in this whole episode. My take, I love that we see Elaine putting on this persona here. She's clearly gone into this dinner on the defensive. We know she's gone into it feeling like this because of what she said in the last scene. She feels inadequate when she's with these married people and that she's always made to feel less than because she's single. So she's armed herself with this bullfighter story. I think she came into the dinner knowing she was going to talk about this. And, it's human. Who among us hasn't embellished a bit when we felt like we don't belong? I mean, for me personally, there were many times growing up that I embellished stuff about my boring ass life because, well, I wasn't really allowed to do the things that most of my friends were doing. So on some level, I get this because I was like, oh yeah, I totally did that. Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. So I'm not throwing any shade at Elaine because I've been there, I've done it. And yeah, I guess it's technically lying, but at the same time, it was survival mode for me so that I didn't seem like such a weirdo alien to my friends. Once again, in this scene, we see George just putting the hurt on some spaghetti. And I wonder if this was Jason Alexander's request, because in the fix-up, he's also going to town, like so disgusting, on a plate of spaghetti as well. Now, if Elaine eats Oreos like she's having sex with them, I think George can be accused of the same with spaghetti. In fact, in the scene, you see that he's barely even paying attention to the conversation because he's so enamored with the food. He's just like shoveling it in and oh, can you please pass the salt? Like it's his only focus in this entire scene until the sneeze. Speaking of the sneeze, wow, Michael has some issues. Kind of reminds me of Arnie in a later episode, Beth's second husband, and the guy who tells Elaine to shut up during striptease. She's not a fan of the yelling. Elaine has friends with angry men in their lives. Dan is another one. Oh, there's so many. Okay, moving on. We're in Jerry's car. He's on his date with Angela, the hit and run driver. They're both licking ice cream cones. She's very into this ice cream. Now, Angela is played by Melinda McGraw. She's been in many television shows and films over her career, but most notably in The X-Files. She played Scully's sister in The X-Files, and on Mad Men. She was in Mad Men. She also was in The Dark Knight and played Barbara Gordon, the wife of Jim Gordon, played by Gary Oldman. Now, this is our second Seinfeld alum who's also in The Dark Knight, the boyfriend who stays with Elaine, and she has that scene where she tries to get him to the airport, and they wake up late and all that. That man was in The Dark Knight as well. He was in one of the boats. So this is our second character. Melinda, she played Barbara Gordon. Not a huge role. You see her at the end. And this is so dumb and shallow, but I'm going to talk about it. She looks completely different to me. I remember this isn't the first time I found out that she is the same actress as Barbara Gordon, because I knew this before, but I pride myself on recognizing actors like years and years apart on different shows or movies. But this totally stumped me, and it still stumps me because I can look at a side-by-side picture of her as Angela in this episode and then her as Barbara Gordon. I feel like they look nothing alike. I don't know if she's had a lot of work done, which, no judgment. Hey, do your thing if you want to have work done. But this isn't relevant at all. But she just looks so different. I don't think I would have ever guessed they were the same person. And beyond that, not a reflection of her acting, but I just hate this character, especially the turn she takes later in the episode. As far as the performance goes, Melinda McGraw is fine. I think maybe this is how she was directed, but I just really hate the way the character turns into a mob boss out of nowhere. But I'll get to that later. But anyway, Melinda McGraw, that's who plays Angela. Then talk about Anthony Quinn in this scene. And Jerry just keeps bringing whatever they're talking about back to driving and hitting things on the road, but leaving notes. And he's definitely trying to steer her maybe into an admission or maybe a show of regret. I think that's what Jerry's hoping for. All right, in the next scene, we're back at the restaurant. Oh, it's the aftermath of saying God bless you to Robin. George is totally like, hey, I was just joking around. And Robin's trying to calm her husband. She's just calm down. He was just joking. Michael just won't stop. You think you're so damn special because you say God bless you? I don't think I'm special. My mother always told me I'm not special. Robin is so mortified. She apologizes to George. Oh, okay. Take his side. Well, I'm not taking his side. Well, whose side are you on? I'm not taking your side. Then Robin sneezes again. George just gestures to Michael. Take it. Say it. Say bless you. I'm not really going to analyze this scene too much. It's a very short scene. Elaine is sitting there, but she has no dialogue and is just observing the Michael meltdown and shaking her head. So no real commentary to make here. The next scene, we're back in Jerry's car. He and Angela are full on making out. And then Jerry stops to talk about Kirk Douglas and his driving etiquette. If he hits a car, he doesn't leave a note. He waits for the driver. If she's not interested, just pulls him back in for more making out. The next scene, we're in Jerry's apartment, and George is talking about, what is so wrong with saying God bless you? And this conversation is probably one of the best of the entire series. Honestly, I love this. Jerry says, well, did you allow space for the husband? Because he has the right of first refusal. Meanwhile, Elaine buzzes. And George says, yes, I waited. And if he passes on that option, the God bless you is up for grabs. No argument, unless she's a multiple sneezer. And he's holding his God bless you until she completes the series. George doesn't think she's a multiple sneezer because she sneezed again later, and that was also a single. Maybe she's having an off night. Elaine enters, sees George, and says, well, if it isn't Mr. Gesundheit. George, he's not backing down. He says, I was raised to say God bless you. But after Jerry sneezes, he just says, shut up. And Elaine wonders, what does it even mean? It's a stupid superstition. A stupid what? Whatever. And then Jerry comes up with the idea, if you really want to make someone feel better after they sneeze, you should just tell them you're so good looking. Elaine likes it. It's better than God bless you. Then Elaine tells George, hey, Robin left me a message. She wants you to call her. George says, well, why? Well, probably to apologize because that's why she called me. And then George asks to use the remote phone. I love that. And goes into Jerry's bedroom to call Robin. Meanwhile, Kramer enters while Jerry and Elaine are watching Entertainment Tonight and starts convulsing as soon as Mary Hart starts speaking. After what seems to be a minute and a half of Kramer just convulsing in the background, Jerry and Elaine notice him, and Elaine figures out it's Mary Hart's voice. It's giving you seizures, just like that woman in Albany, which there was a woman that really did happen. I remember that. I'm going, what an insult to Mary Hart, who I don't really care if she's insulted now because she is a conspiracy theorist, apparently. Anyway, we don't have to get into that. George comes back, and he's very bothered by the conversation. He says, Robin wants to get together. And Elaine says, married women don't get together. They have affairs. You could tell George is a little tickled by that. He's still kind of hesitant, but saying, oh, it's so adult. Wow, it's almost exciting to him. And also, it probably wouldn't cost him any money. And Elaine asks, are you really thinking of doing this? No, I can't have an affair with a married woman. Yeah, that's like hitting a car and not even leaving a note. To which Jerry sort of reacts, yeah, guilty conscience. Kramer breaks the news that the girl whose car was hit was the blonde across the street. What blonde? The blonde, the ponytail, and the blue sweatpants. Jerry reacts, oh, she is a hottie. Then, as he's gushing over blue sweatpants blonde girl, he notices Elaine looking at him. Yeah, I think I've seen her. Elaine's got to get going, meeting a guy with gray sweatpants. She exits, and, then Kramer thinks, well, how do you know it's not John Tesh, and follows her out. Then Jerry runs to George, the blonde with the blue sweatpants. He's had a crush on her for over a year. He's never had the nerve to talk to her. And George points out, well, you can't say anything now because of Angela. Well, now Jerry's just turned off by Angela, lousy thug. She belongs in prison. I owe it to society to do something. And George says, we need more people like you in the world. And don't sell yourself short, George, saying God bless you to any Tom, Dick, and Harry. The world needs more people like us. That's why the world is in the shape it's in. You're telling me. Flip that magazine page. The purpose of this scene, all the storylines advance. We do see Elaine's involvement kind of wane to the B storyline, and George's kind of increases. So it's, first it was Elaine's friend and all this stuff, and now George is kind of taking over as the prominent part of that B plot with her friends. And my take, a lot happens in this scene. I love the Jerry and George back and forth. Like I said earlier, that classic Seinfeld conversation regarding the sneeze. The humor comes from how seriously it's discussed. And it's so funny because it's such a simple thing that everyone can relate to. And it's discussed in such a serious tone, like, hey, we got to figure this out. So that's really where the humor comes from. But it's so true. I am a multiple sneezer, in case any of you were wondering. I get it from my mother, who we used to, and we still do, we count As soon as she starts sneezing, all right, we're like, okay, let's count. I think, I'm not even kidding you, we have gotten up to over 20 sneezes in a series for my mom. And I think I average around 8 or 9 for sure. I love sneezing. It feels so good, you guys. Sorry, that got really weird. Okay. In Elaine's role in this scene, I'm not sure why she seems annoyed at George when she enters, when she does the whole, well, if it isn't Mr. Gesundheit. Sure, okay, I mean, technically his comment started the fight, but it's Michael who went off the rails, so I don't really see why she's at all annoyed with George, except to be like, hey, you ruined the dinner. Like, maybe you should have just not made a joke about this guy. You don't even know him. I can kind of see that. But ultimately, it's like, hey, Michael's the one that really ruined the dinner. I thought the line where she compares having an affair to hitting a parked car without leaving a note, it was so forced. It was kind of weak writing for my taste. Like, why would she say that? It was only to have that moment of Jerry going, yeah, okay. And then finally with Elaine in the scene, I don't know why this episode takes, in my opinion, a huge step back with Jerry and Elaine sort of having this weirdness about talking about other people. Again, I mean, this hasn't happened since the first season, and it's weird. I mean, Jerry backing off his, kind of reacting to the blonde in the blue sweatpants, and then seeing Elaine and having to kind of back off. Like, what? And then Elaine being all smug. I'm going to meet a guy in gray sweatpants. Like, I just felt this was really out of place and not in sync with how their friendship has evolved since that first season when this was addressed at all. So yeah, I just felt like, why is this an issue again? The next scene, we are at, the blue sweatpants blonde woman who's Becky Gelke. We're at her door. And Jerry's telling her, I'm going to make sure whoever was responsible is found. And, don't worry, I'm on the case. And he says it in sort of a funny way. And she laughs, touches his arm and says, God bless you. Thank you very much. Oh, tractor beam, just taken in. Jerry is taken in by her. Now, Becky Gelke is played by Helen Slater. She's best known for playing Supergirl in the movie of the same name in 1984. And then she acted in many films and television in the 80s, and only to return to the Superman universe playing Superman's mother in the series Smallville. And then she played Supergirl's foster mother in the television show Supergirl, which was from just a few years ago. So a lot of Supergirl in Helen Slater's career. And I think she's perfectly cast as this pretty girl next door. Well, literally, or I guess girl across the street. She's so sweet, and you can see why Jerry is attracted to her. And apparently she was good friends with Jason Alexander, who directed this episode, and he asked for a favor and asked Helen Slater to play Becky Gelke. So it's a little behind the scenes facts there. Next, we're in George's bedroom. He's just slept with Robin. We can't believe he did this. He just committed adultery. And she corrects him. No, I committed adultery. Oh, yeah. And she admits, if it wasn't for him, it would have been someone else. In 3 years, he's never said, God bless you. George can't believe it. That must be hell to live in that house. Next, we move on to Elaine's apartment. Michael's on the phone. He asks if Robin's there. Elaine says no. She told me she was with you. Oh, God. Apparently, Elaine was the cover story for Robin when she went to see George. And, yeah, Michael's not stupid. He figures it out. She's not with your bald friend. And then Elaine's trying to save it. No, come on, Michael. And she makes up this story. Yes. She was here and then she left, but she left a note. Just trying to save it. It's not working. Michael's already down his rage wormhole, talking about sewing George's ass to his face, among other things. Then he sneezes. All Elaine can say is, you're so good looking. The purpose of this scene, we see the B story blow up with Michael catching Robin in the act. And my take, this is the most we get to see Julia Louis-Dreyfus play in this episode. And that moment she figures it out and tries to save it is really good. I love the little crumple of the paper when she says, oh, this is the note. God, and Robin, geez, talk about sloppy. You should have let Elaine know at least. I mean, George knows. He does this later with Elaine. They devise a cover-up story when he goes to meet Marissa Tomei. So, yeah, clearly Robin is an amateur here. So next, we're at Jerry's apartment. We are sort of in the middle of Angela threatening Jerry. Now listen to me, SHUCKFACE. You tell anybody anything. Yeah, she's threatening Jerry with a lot of bad things she's going to do to him. Elaine enters sort of in the middle of this heated exchange and hears Angela say, "You don't say anything to anybody about me hitting that car." Angela exits and Elaine kind of looks after her and says, "Nice meeting you." Oh, Elaine is so smug and she can't hold back. Oh, it must have been so frightening when you confronted that guy in Queens. Jerry's embarrassed. Okay, Elaine. George enters. Elaine asks, "Have you checked your machine?" "No, why?" "Well, Michael called and he was asking where Robin was." "Yeah?" "I said I hadn't seen her." George freaks out. Elaine explains that Robin didn't tell her she was her cover. But she figured it out. And I said she left a note and he really didn't buy that. "Well, what did he say?" "Well, he mentioned your name and said he was going to sew your ass to your face." Oh my gosh. George cannot believe Elaine screwed this up. How hard is it to lie? Well, then Elaine says, "Well, you didn't have to sleep with her, George." And then George says, "Wait, hey, this is your fault too, because you got her all juiced up with that story about the matador." And Jerry hears this and says, "Excuse me, hold it, people. Matador?" Yeah, she told this couple she had an affair with a matador. Uno momento, por favor. Oh, then he just gets in Elaine's face. So it's kind of a little bit of a payback. They both lied about something and they both found out. So what can Jerry do except tease her? The purpose of this scene, we see a bunch of things blow up. Both Jerry and Elaine's lies and George's comfort that his affair with Robin was a secret from Michael. My take. Okay. Oh, I hate the top of the scene with Angela's threatening tirade to Jerry, especially that shock face. What? I don't know why she made this choice or why it was directed this way, but it's like a really bad impression of a mobster. Like, I hate it. I really hate it. I do love Elaine's bravado when she realizes Jerry's car chase story was fake, and her teasing Jerry about it is really well done. And then when George finds out about Elaine's fumble with Michael's phone call, I love their back and forth. I mean, any George and Elaine argument is gold. And I just, on a side note, I love the sewing his ass to his face. I just love that line. It's such a great visual. And Jerry cutting in when George mentions the matador and teasing her it's just as delicious as what she did to him, moments earlier. Uno momento, por favor. And you can totally tell JLD is trying not to break the entire time. She's kind of twitching her face and she does allow a little smile, but I think it's because she's really trying not to just totally break and ruin the scene. All right, next we're at Becky Gelke's door again. Jerry is talking about, this person who hit your car. They said to get an estimate. And she says, "Okay, well, I got one. It's $875. And Jerry says, "You know what? I'll give you a check. And then that person can pay me back." And as Jerry's writing the check out, he's like, "So, what are you doing Friday night or Saturday night or something?" And he asks her out. she smells a rat. She's like, "I can't believe you. You hit my car and now you're trying to hit on me? I didn't hit your car." And she sneezes. And Jerry says, "You're so good looking." She thanks him and slams the door in his face. And she does take the check. So Becky Gelke got hers and, rightfully calls out Jerry. The next scene, we're in Jerry's apartment. George is trying to hurry Jerry up. I guess he's going on the road with Jerry, even though he's going to be gone on comedy gigs for 3 weeks. And George says, "Listen, I've got a psycho stalking me. I cannot stay in the city." And Kramer enters, disgusted with Jerry. "I just talked to Becky Gelke. You're the one who hit her car?" Jerry explains what happened. "No, I was covering for someone else." And he's like, "You're not going to lie to me." "No." Kramer's like, "All right, well, we got that straightened out. And by the way, I got a date with Becky Gelke. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have had a reason to talk to her. So thank you, buddy." Jerry says, "I'm happy to help." Then we have a very short scene at the end. Kramer arriving with a lot of gel in his hair, slicked back, arrives at Becky's door. She opens the door and oh no, Mary Hart is in the background. And Kramer starts convulsing and drenching her in his gross hair gel oil, whatever the hell he has in his hair. Clearly there for the visual effect of when he started convulsing. Oh, that poor actress who had to get that stuff in her face. Blech. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. You've always been the loyal and trustworthy friend, a ride or die through thick and thin. So it makes sense. You are the go-to cover for your friends' extramarital affairs. And being a good friend means keeping their secret from their cuckolded spouses. At Alibi Improv Training, we teach you to be quick on your feet when explaining the fake whereabouts of your philandering friends. We teach you the rules of basic improv and take it a step further by setting every scene as an interaction with their clueless husband or wife. Lights up! Hey, weren't you and my wife supposed to be at the mall? Oh, hi. Yes, we already went to the mall, and now we're at my house talking about women's issues. You know, periods and pantyhose. Can I talk to my wife? She's not answering her phone. Hang on a sec. Oh, she's in the bathroom. The orange Julius we had when we were at the mall gave her diarrhea. Oh no, is she okay? Oh yes, I gave her my special anti-diarrhea medicine. Should kick the diarrhea in about an hour and then she will be home. But if she takes longer, it's only because her diarrhea hasn't stopped. Okay, well, tell my wife I hope she feels better and dinner will be at 6:45 on the dot. Sure thing. I'm sure she will be fully satisfied by then because her diarrhea will be gone. And scene. Don't ever be unprepared to cover for your cheating friend. Wouldn't you feel awful if it was you who ruined the only thing getting them up in the morning? Successful affairs and transgressions are up 40% in the last 2 years, and we at Alibi Improv Training like to think we've had a huge part in that. Our instructors are experienced in all things improv and all things cheating. You will be taught by folks who've cheated, been cheated on, and were the cover for their lying friends. Yeah, we know our way around extramarital affairs. So ignore your conscience and call Alibi Improv Training today and be the reason your friend can safely have sex with someone who is not their spouse. Alibi Improv Training. Hey, it's not your problem. And we're back. In the notes about nothing, the relationship between Robin and Elaine is explained a bit more. In an early draft of the script, apparently, Elaine says that she worked with Robin in her office for only about a month, and Robin sort of trapped her and just asked if she was busy and then asked her to dinner. It was a bait and switch, as the early script said. So, yeah, there was supposed to be a little bit more explanation about how they knew each other. Definitely works without knowing that either. And then there was a JLD quote on why she loved playing Elaine. She says, "She's written as a character who can spar with the best of them, and that's fun. She's not a stereotype in any way. She's not defined by her relationship with Jerry. She's her own person." I feel like, a lot of these quotes by JLD that they include, they all say pretty much the same thing. I'm sure they're from different publications and, different articles, but I like that that's an ongoing theme with why JLD loved playing this character. And I think that's pretty much the basis of Elaine. She isn't defined by who she is to Jerry or anyone else, really. She's just her own person. So I can see why that's something she brings up quite a bit. Another thing mentioned in the notes about nothing is that the actress who played Robin, Ann Talman, she dated Michael Richards for several years. I thought that was interesting. There was a quote by Jerry Seinfeld about JLD, and he says, "Julia can be so deft with tricky material, yet she's great at swinging from the heels of comedy. It's really astounding to me the variety of things she does. She's such a broad. Now, I didn't know what the hell swinging from the heels meant, so I did a little bit of research. And no surprise, coming from Jerry Seinfeld, it's a baseball term where the batter is fooled by a pitch but has already committed to a swing. The batter will switch from his toes to his less stable heels. And the batter is hoping for the best despite being completely outmatched. So it's sort of like in the moment reaction. So metaphorically, it means an attempt at great success from a position of great weakness. So that explained what he meant. I think what he means is you can throw anything at Julia and she's able to pivot and react with great success every time. And I couldn't agree more. Moving on to Contributor Corner. Greg had some thoughts this week, and let's dig right in. Greg says, I really like the setup for Jerry's story in this episode and how Elaine ties in with egging him on to confront the hit-and-run driver. Leave it to Elaine to try to do the right thing and force her friends to as well. What are you, yellow? She challenges him with. The following scene where she asks Jerry what happened is done well, with George knowing the truth and enjoying watching Jerry bullshit Elaine. Props to whomever wrote the line, I am speechless. I am without speech. Brilliant. Wow, I think I'm not on quite the same page as you, Greg, with loving the premise or this bullshit story that Jerry tells Elaine. Again, it's not like the worst thing, but I don't love it. But I do agree with you where you say that, Elaine would do the right thing. Elaine would confront the person. So I like that she does egg him on to do the same thing. So I agree with you there. Next, Greg says, Elaine telling the story at dinner about the matador is hilarious as she is so desperate to sound like her life is thrilling and it's eclipsed by George eating at breakneck speed for some reason. Her body language as George gets into the God bless you argument is telling of how she immediately knows bringing George was a mistake. She's visually cringing. It's funny. I probably should have kept my eye on JLD more during that scene, but I kind of see it every now and then with her like kind of looking back and forth and feeling very uncomfortable. But I'm going to get a little bit more into what I feel should have happened with JLD in that scene a bit later with my final notes. But I do like, just like you, I like the bravado of her telling that story and just going like, oh, it's so great to meet new people. And then, yeah, of course, George totally ruins it. Well, Michael ruins it, really. Yeah, I blame Michael for this whole thing. Greg goes on to say, while Kramer's subplot of having seizures to Mary Hart's voice is small and purely just to give Michael Richards something physical to play with, I like how Elaine is the one who figures out what's wrong with him. This scene in the apartment with all four of them together works well to move each story along for the final act. Jerry finding out about Becky Gelke, George being lured into an affair, and Kramer finding out what's causing his seizures. Any of this could have been done on its own, but combining it all into one conversation just works so well. Yes, this whole episode, there's so much jam-packed, and when I was taking notes on each scene, I was just going like, my gosh, this just keeps going and keeps going. So they do pack a lot in. And like I said earlier, I think it's done pretty well, even when there are a lot of things going on. I think the flow is well, and the transitions between all the different plots kind of advancing is done well too. And finally, Greg says, I love how Elaine tries to cover for George and Robin when Michael calls. Her panicked lying is so well done. Her next scene with Jerry and George is also perfection, as she both happily calls out Jerry for lying about his bravery and also her shift to explaining to George that he needs to watch his back with Michael. Considering Elaine doesn't really have a story of her own, it's awesome how she's written into the other storylines so much so that she's basically the lead in the episode. That's an interesting way to see it. I felt like with her story, that B story with her and George, she definitely has the more predominant role in it at the beginning of it. And then as Robin calls George, then it kind of reverses, like if it was like a scales kind of thing, George would have the heavier part in the second half. So, I don't know. I'll get more into this later because I can always use more Elaine. I like the covering scene. Yes, I do think she does. JLD always does that so well with the kind of, trying to think in the moment what to say. So I really do think she did that well. And calling out Jerry, super fun. But I'll have more to say about Elaine's involvement in this episode later. And we also have contributor Lee, who emailed me this week. And so he says he has a question instead of a comment on this episode. Lee asks, when George forces Jerry to go along with the story about following and confronting the hit-and-run driver in Queens, did Elaine believe Jerry? It seemed to me that she did. But her reaction and Jerry trying to intimidate the driver, karate stance really, seemed out of character for both. Lee, I think this is why I'm not crazy about it, because it does seem out of character. You say when George forces Jerry to go along with the story. I think, Jerry sort of started it. I don't think he meant for it to get as involved until George forces him to get into wasn't there like shoving and that kind of stuff. I do like that element of it because I feel like the lying expert George would be like, hey, take this further, to Jerry. But I think at its core, that's really why I'm not really crazy about that whole interaction of Jerry explaining this thing to Elaine and Elaine being gullible enough to believe it. It seems out of character, like you said. Now, I just was reminded in a few episodes from now, maybe 2 or 3 episodes from now, we're going to get that parking spot episode where Elaine goes into a really elaborate story about a pack of wild teenagers. And so we're going to see something kind of similar to what Jerry does here. Yeah, making up car stories seems to be a little bit of a runner here in season 3. Thank you so much, Greg and Lee, for your emails this week and your thoughts and your question. If you would like to become a contributor to Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. My favorite Elaine moments. Well, this is another episode where there isn't a ton of comedy for JLD to play with, but I do love her moment of playing with Jerry and teasing him about his fake story. I like when Elaine sort of has that swagger. So that's my favorite part of Elaine's contribution to this episode. In my final notes, this episode is very middle of the road for me. There are moments of brilliance, like the sneeze conversation, but overall, I don't love it. The A plot with Jerry just feels very rushed and shallow. The better story is definitely the George and Elaine plot. And Kramer's thing is just thrown in there so we get to see some physical comedy by Michael Richards. Same thing Greg says. So yeah, I completely agree with that. Honestly, this episode could have just not had Jerry's plot at all, and we could have just concentrated on the complicated nature of George having an affair with one of Elaine's friends. I mean, that would have been a lot better for me. Jerry's story just wasn't really thought out too well. I always want more Elaine. This episode could have used way more Elaine. It's not that she didn't have a lot of screen time. She's in quite a few of the scenes, but especially when Michael's going off the rails at that dinner and she's just got her head in her hands and she's just burying her face. I don't know. I just, rather than just reacting and having zero dialogue, I just wish we had more involvement. Like Elaine's thoughts about Michael and Robin, maybe her and George banding together. And how that would have affected her friendship with Robin, or maybe just confronting Robin about the affair. I don't know. I think there could have been an opportunity to have Elaine be a little bit more involved, having a little bit more of an Elaine reaction. We know Elaine has opinions all the time. So for her to just kind of be a background player when this whole interaction's going on between Michael, Robin, and George, it seems like a missed opportunity to me. Just needed more Elaine. Big surprise. That's my thought. And I think that's all I can say about The Good Samaritan. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.